Now that we've done all of the reading that we want to do through our publications before we conduct a restricted waters transit, the next step is to actually go into our charts or our DNCs and apply corrections and updates to the charts that we'll be using. So when we want to prepare our charts, we want to first select the charts that apply to our voyage, whether it's just a port visit or an entire ocean-going voyage. We want to grab the most detailed charts available. That is to say, the largest scale charts. Those are the ones that are going to make sure that we aren't missing any potential navigational hazards or other details that we really want to make sure that we are aware of as we travel to a new place or perhaps a familiar place. We want to make sure that we also have all the charts that we need to cover the entire passage. So if you are a paper chart ship, certainly you would want to make sure that you've ordered all the charts that you need prior to deploying, for example. And then when you do go through and update and correct all of your charts, at the end of the day, both charts on the bridge and CIC for all charts that you're going to use need to be identical. So you can't just update the bridge charts. Of course, CIC, their charts need to be up to date as well. So how do we correct our charts and publications? There are a few things that we're going to cover. The first is Notice to Mariners. Notice to Mariners is published by NGA, and it provides updates to the charts that have not yet been incorporated into a new edition of a chart. Local Notice to Mariners is a similar idea, but is only updated and generated by the Coast Guard. So we'll take a look at what both of those publications look like here in the next few slides. Then the final thing that we want to take a look at as we are correcting our charts and publications is the navigational safety warnings, and those can be HydroPac or HydroLant, nav areas, NavTex, NavInfoNet, SafetyNet, and Coast Guard local broadcast warnings. So a whole host of information out there. We'll show you how to access each of those and what kind of information those are going to provide for you. So this slide shows you an example of what a Notice to Mariners entry looks like, and this comes straight from NGA, this example. So we've got a lot of numbers, letters, and symbols in here. We'll just go through each part of it to show you what we're looking at. So if we start on the left-hand side, we've got a couple of things to indicate. So we can read at the bottom this key that says a star indicates that it's based on US source information. T indicates that it's temporary in nature, and P indicates that it is preliminary. So you will get more information about that given entry in a future Notice to Mariners. So in this entry, we have all three of those letters corresponding to this particular entry, but you may only see one or two of them. The next thing, as we're moving to the right-hand side, and we're on this top line here, is we have the chart numbers. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So once you've pulled all the charts that you need for a given voyage or a given transit, you'll want to annotate each of the charts, all of the chart numbers that you're using, so that you can search through Notice to Mariners, which we'll show you here in a minute, as to which corrections and updates apply to those particular charts. And then next to it, we have the International Chart Series number, if that applies, and then the edition number that this update is being made to. So you always want the most recent version of any chart that you want to use. It's going to help you in minimizing the number of corrections you're going to have to make on your own. If you have an older edition, you'll have to go back farther in Notice to Mariners to make sure that your chart is completely correct. So here we have the edition number, in this case the first edition, and the date of that edition, which in this case is January 23rd, 2010. And then next they have the last Notice to Mariners that affected the chart. This one is 44/11, so something probably later on in the year of 2011. There was an entry in that Notice to Mariners that applied to this chart. And then finally on the right-hand side, we have the Notice to Mariners that's current at this entry, which is 3/13. So one of the earlier Notice to Mariners for the year 2013. So now we've got all of that preliminary information, we can go to the second line. And second line tells you what you actually need to be doing on your chart. So here, the corrective action, add a depth of 12 meters, an obstruction. And then it has a chart 1 reference, which you can refer to with that publication as well. And then the position of the obstruction at that depth of 12 meters that we see. So in this case, what you would do is just plot that position on your chart, annotating that there is an obstruction there located at a depth of 12 meters. And then on that third line, we have the source of information as well. So that's how the Notice to Mariners, each of them, are structured. Now that you know how to read one of those, we'll take a look at some examples. So I'm going to come up here to my NGA website. And you've seen this before in previous lectures. I am on the Notice to Mariners page. So if I take a look at this Notice to Mariners page, I can see all the latest Notice to Mariners here on the right-hand side. If I'm looking for one in particular, I can use this drop-down menu to look through and pull a specific one that I might be interested in. But most likely, I'm going to be using those most recent updates. There's a few ways of doing this as we get into it. We have an online database that we can use to get chart corrections for a particular chart or a particular set of charts. So if we want to do that, let's say, for example, I want to take a look at what chart corrections NGA has on file for a particular chart. I'm going to choose a Norfolk chart. I'm going to choose 12245. So if I enter that number in and I click search, I'll open up this menu, which shows corrections for the latest Notice to Mariners for this particular chart. I typed in this chart number, 12245, and here's the last Notice to Mariners that applies. And it also says, just like we saw on our example entry, it will tell us what's the latest edition of this chart. The 70th edition here, last updated in February of 2019. So I take a look, and I see that there are a couple corrections that I need to make on my chart. I need to delete buoy number 2 at that position that we have listed, relocate buoy number 5 from this position to a different position, change a buoy characteristic in a position, and then add a new buoy, buoy 2NN, at the position listed. So that's a great way to take a look at quickly what kinds of changes I want to make to my chart. Now that we know what a Notice to Mariners looks like and how we access it on the NGA website, let's look at what the NavDome requires when it comes to updating and correcting our charts. So we want to maintain records for all the updates and changes that we're making. Anytime we're making corrections on a paper chart, we'll have a complete and accurate correction tree, and we'll show you what that looks like here in the next slide. And we want to make sure that any charts and publications contained in the CO's Ready chart list, we want to make sure those are always being updated. So even if you're not currently navigating on those charts on the Ready chart list, that's going to be a ship-specific instruction. You want to make sure that you're still updating those charts so that when you do enter those areas in which you will be navigating those charts, usually they are for your home port and the areas around your home port at a minimum, those need to be up to date and ready to go. And then for VMS certified charts, we want the current and previous edition of the electronic corrections to the DNCs, aka the VDU patch, the Vector Data Unit patch. Those need to be kept on board as well. So that's just the electronic version for those ships that are VMS certified. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in this lecture, but primarily you'll get information on that in your VMS lessons. The Senior QM or OS is responsible for reviewing charts, publications, and correction files to ensure that's properly maintained. So that's specified in the nav dorm, and of course the navigator provides oversight. All right, here's an example of that correction tree that I was talking about. And again, what needs to be included in that correction tree is outlined in the nav dorm. We need to include which notice to mariners we are using, so the number and the year, what date that notice to mariners correction was applied, the initials of the person who are actually completing the corrections as well. So you can see here in our photo here, we have space for quite a few notice to mariners as you continually update the chart. And you want to make sure that these correction trees are readily visible. So they should be either somewhere outside the margins and easy to see and quickly reference so that we know how up to date a given chart is. All right, so again, let's return to our notice to mariners. We want to use that information to update our charts. So anytime we use a particular notice to mariners to update charts, we want to maintain a record of that. And if we do use local notice to mariners, something we'll dive into here in a minute, we want to make sure that we're holding on to that as well.